e4. King's pawn opening, opening line. The king's pawn opening move is both popular and logical. It controls the center, opens lines for both the queen and the bishop, and usually leads to an open game in which tactics, rather than slow maneuvering, predominates. e5. King's pawn game, opening line. Black responds symmetrically, making a direct challenge to the central squares. Knight f3. King's knight opening, opening line. With the possible exception of 2f4, this is the most logical second move against Black's symmetrical answer to the king pawn. The knight attacks e5, clears the way for an eventual castle, and rests on its best defensive square. Knight c6. Queen's knight variation, opening line. Now, when white plays 3 knight c3 instead of the Ruy Lopez, it's the three knights game, a leisurely system. Bishop b5. Ruy Lopez Spanish, opening line. This is the Ruy Lopez move. It is designed to maintain long-term pressure on Black's center. If driven away, the king's bishop will take up a position at b3 or c2 to focus on a king's side attack or on the central squares. a6. Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, opening line. This move, popularized by the great Paul Morphy, provides Black greater flexibility. Black doesn't fear 4 bishop takes c6. See the exchange variation. Bishop a4. Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, opening line. d6. Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, modern Steinitz defense, opening line. The modern Steinitz defense, or deferred, interpolates 3a6, so that Black will have the option of cutting off the pin in subsequent complications. c3. Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, modern Steinitz defense, opening line. Knight f6. Out of opening book. Bishop d7 would have been in the Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, modern Steinitz defense, opening line. Attacks white's pawn at e4. d4. Bishop d7. Frees Black's knight at c6 from the pin. Knight b d2 removes the threat on white's pawn at e4. Bishop e7 clears the way for a kingside castle. Castle kingside. Castle kingside. Rook e1. Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, Averbach variation, transposed, opening line. Rook e8. Out of opening book. Bishop e8 would have been in the Ruy Lopez Spanish, Morphy defense, Averbach variation, Kexkamet variation, book opening. Knight f1. Bishop f8. Bishop c2. E takes d4. C takes d4. White wins a pawn for a pawn. Material is even. Bishop g4 pins white's knight at f3. Knight g3 takes the knight away from the edge of the board. d5. Bishop takes f3, attacks white's queen and blocks white's pawn at f2. Knight d7 moves it to safety. f4. g6. Bishop b3 threatens black's pawn at d5. Knight b6 protects black's pawn at d5. f5. Queen h4. f4. Knight a5. Bishop c2. c5. b4 attacks black's knight at a5. C takes b4, removes the threat on black's knight at a5 and isolates white's pawn at a2. Black wins a pawn. King h1. Knight c6 moves it off the edge. Rook g1. King h8. F takes g6, attacks black's pawn at f7 and isolates black's pawn at f7 and black's pawn at h7. F takes g6, isolates white's pawn at h2. Black wins a pawn for a pawn. Knight e2. Knight e2. Bishop h6. Bishop h6. Queen f1. Rook a c8. Bishop d3. Rook f8. Rook g3. King g7. f5 partially pins black's pawn at g6. Bishop takes c1. Black wins a bishop. Black is up a knight and a pawn. f6 check. Checks black's king and creates a passed pawn on f6. King g8 moves it out of check. Rook takes c1. b3 slightly better is knight takes d4. b3 slightly better is knight takes d4. A takes b3. White wins a bishop and a pawn. Material is even. Knight d7 slightly better is knight takes d4. Queen g2 attacks black's pawn at d5. Knight takes f6 removes the threat on black's pawn at d5. E takes f6 attacks black's pawn at d5 and pushes the passed pawn. King h8. Bishop takes g6, isolates black's pawn at h7. Rook takes f6. White wins a knight and a pawn for 2 pawns. Bishop d3 slightly better is rook h3. Rook h6. Rook g1. Knight e7 removes the threat on black's pawn at d5. Rook h3 threatens mate. Queen to g7 skewers black's queen and attacks black's queen. Queen f6 moves it to safety and takes control of the open file. Rook f3 attacks black's queen. Rook g8 threatens white's queen. rook takes f6. Attacks black's rook at h6. Rook takes g2. Leads to rook takes h6. Rook takes g1. Check. King takes g1. King g7. Rook takes h7. Check. King f6. Rook h6. Check. King g5. Rook b6. Knight c6. Rook takes b7. a5. Rook b5. Knight b4. Bishop e4. King f6. Bishop takes d5, which wins a queen and a rook for 2 rooks and 3 pawns. Better is rook takes f6, leading to knight g3, rook f8, queen e2, knight c6, knight f5, rook takes g1, check, king takes g1, a5, queen h5, knight b4, queen h6, rook f7, queen e6, rook g7, check, knight takes g7, knight takes d3, which wins 2 rooks and a bishop for 2 rooks. Rook takes g2. Leads to rook takes h6. Rook takes g1. Check. King takes g1. King g7. Rook takes h7. Check. King f6. Rook h6. Check. King g5. Rook b6. Knight c6. Rook takes b7. a5. Rook b5. Knight b4. Bishop e4. King f6. Bishop takes d5, which wins a queen and a rook for 2 rooks and 3 pawns. Better is rook takes f6, leading to knight g3, rook f8, queen e2, knight c6, knight f5, rook takes g1, check, king takes g1, a5, queen h5, knight b4, queen h6, rook f7, queen e6, rook g7, check, knight takes g7, knight takes d3, which wins 2 rooks and a bishop for 2 rooks. Rook takes h6. Blocks black's pawn at h7. Rook takes g1. Check. Checks white's king. King takes g1. King g7. Attacks white's rook. King f8. Moves it out of check. Rook takes h7. Check. Skewers black's king, checks black's king, and creates a passed pawn on h2. White wins a queen, 2 rooks, and a pawn for a queen and a rook. White is up a rook and a bishop in material. Knight f4. King e8. h4. Advances the passed pawn. Knight c6. Attacks white's pawn at d4. Knight e6. Yikes! Leads to knight e7, knight c5, king f8, knight takes b7. Much better is bishop g6, check, leading to king d8, knight e6, check, king c8, rook c7, check, king b8, rook f7, a5, h5, a4, h6, a3, h7, a2, h8, queen, check, king a7, rook f1, knight e7, bishop d3, king b6, which gains a queen and loses 2 pawns by comparison. Knight e7. removes the threat on black's pawn at b7. h5 advances the passed pawn. King d7 attacks white's knight. Knight c5 check moves it to safety and forks black's king and black's pawn at b7. King d6 moves it out of check. Rook g7 white has a mate in 8. Leads to knight g8, rook takes g8, b6, h6, b takes c5, h7, c takes d4, h8, queen, king, c5, rook, c8, check, king, b4, queen takes d4, check, king takes b3, rook, b8, check, king, a2, queen, b2, and checkmate. b6 moves it to safety and attacks white's knight. h6 white has a mate in 7, pushes the passed pawn. Leads to b takes c5, h7, c takes d4, h8, queen, king, c5, rook takes e7, king, b4, queen takes d4, check, king, a3, rook, e2, king takes b3, bishop, b1, a5, rook, e3, and mate. b takes c5 attacks white's pawn at d4. h7 white has a mate in 6, adds a promote threat at h7. Leads to c takes d4, h8, queen, king, c5, rook takes e7, king, b4, queen takes d4, check, king, a3, rook, e2, king takes b3, rook, b2, check, king, a3, queen, b4, and checkmate. c takes d4 creates passed pawns on d5 and d4. h8 queen white has a mate in 5. Leads to king c5, rook takes e7, king b4, queen takes d4, check, king a3, rook e2, king takes b3, rook b2, check, king a3, queen b4, and mate. King c5. Queen b8. White has a mate in 4. Moves it out of the corner. Leads to knight c6, b4. Check. Knight takes b4. Queen a7. Check. King d6. Queen e7. Check. King c6. Queen c7. And checkmate. Knight c6. Moves it to safety and attacks white's queen. Queen b7. White misses the chance for a forced mate. Much better is b4. Check. Leading to knight takes b4. Queen a7. Check. King d6. Queen e7. Check. King c6. Queen c7. And mate. a5. Moves it to safety. Rook g6. White is one move from mate. Threatens mate. Rook captures knight. Leads to knight e5, queen b5, and mate. a4. Rook takes c6. Checkmate. Checkmates black's king.